Check, check. Are we in? Welcome, people. Welcome, one and all. Welcome to interesting stuff. In today's little educational supplement, we are going to be looking at a little bit of the history of Hollywood. So let's dive in and see what we can learn. First of all, why is Hollywood in Hollywood? Well, for one thing, the long daylight hours of Southern California and the variety of landscapes, from deserts to forests, make it an ideal shooting location for all the different kinds of films. Land was also cheap, so that was perfect for setting up little studio backlots, and the taxes originally were quite low. So basically, it was a no-brainer. By 1915, 60% of U.S. film production was based there. See, low taxes, important for attracting businesses. So, even world wars and the worst economic events in history could not prevent the meteoric rise of the star-studded industries that grew out of that part of the world. It's an interesting name, isn't it? Hollywood. Yeah. I heard a story once that there's actually a connection with the holy wood, or the wood of a holly tree, which is considered magical and has been used by wizards in their wands for centuries. That's if there are real wizards. I'm not even sure. Anyway, moving on. By the 1930s, the movie industry was moving along at a blistering pace, and the era of silent film was coming to an end. Of course, the term silent movie is a misnomer. It's quite incorrect, because these films were never viewed in complete silence. Theaters enjoyed having musicians who would play live, and this ranged from piano soloists to full-blown orchestras. Wow, what an amazing experience that must have been. And film distributors would also often provide to the cinemas little cue sheets to help make the performance more interesting. Don Juan in 1926 was the first film to feature a score and sound effects using the all-new sound-on-disc system Vitaphone. The record was played on a turntable, which was connected to the film projector by a motor that controlled the speed. The film was a fantastic critical success, commercial success as well, actually. And the following year, the studio released the first movie with dialogue, when Al Jolson ad-libbed in between musical numbers in The Jazz Singer. Go and check that one out online. Go and check out some clips from it. Really interesting. So, the talkies, or the talking films, presented technical challenges as well. Early microphones had a pretty limited range, and actors had to speak directly into them, very often restricting their performances. And if you know the musical film Singing in the Rain, let the stormy clouds chase everyone from the place, that whole film is a parody of the transition from the silent era in films to the sound era of films. And it's just an all-round happy film as well. You should watch that one. Right. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, the mics and the audio. So the microphones that they used were omnidirectional and always picked up unwanted sounds from all directions. Always a bit of a problem. Luckily, technology has moved forward since then. The solution to that was soundproofing camera castings using something called blimps, which enabled operators to follow the action, mounting the cameras on carted wheels called dollies, with microphones hung from boom arms high above the actors. You've probably seen that as well. You've probably seen those little clips of films, or backstage, but not backstage. What do you call it? Like offcuts from the films and the making of films, and yeah, the films about the making of films, where you see the microphone just hanging there above the actors' heads. So what about that big sign on the hill that is incredibly iconic? Now, well, those letters on the hillside were originally an advert for a housing development. Los Angeles Times publisher Harry Chandler was branching out into real estate and splashed out $21,000. That's quite a lot at that time. For a Hollywood land sign in 1923. The original 13 wood and iron letters were over 13 meters tall and around 9 meters wide. They were rigged together by scaffolding and telephone poles. No one could miss it. You can't even miss it today, especially with the thousands of light bulbs flashing around the letters like a mob of paparazzi. Yeah, the glowing letters of Hollywood. Cool. And one man's idea at one point in time in the past, shows you can make a difference. Shows that you can make a change in the world. So moving on, the Big Five were the 5 major film studios that emerged from Hollywood. This was Paramount Pictures, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM, 20th Century Fox, Warner Brothers Pictures, and RKO. It was the birth of the studio system where companies controlled every aspect of the industry. I'm pretty sure they had agreements between themselves as well. They produced the films, they distributed them, and they screened them in their own cinemas. Actors were employed on long-term contracts rather than just for specific jobs. Wow. And hot on the heels of sound in films came the technology to transform black and white visuals into color. This really moved forward with the introduction of Technicolor's 3-color camera in 1932. Wow. Do you remember The Wizard of Oz? We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. Oh, because. Do you remember that? That was one of the first films to use the full glory of Technicolor. Even in the film, transforming black and white into color through the film. That was such a golden age. Magical films. Fantastic, even by today's standards. Incredible. So, back to this concept of color being used in films. So where are we? 1932. So Technicolor's new camera used the principles of color photography invented by physicist James Maxwell in 1861 when he produced the first color photo using red, green, and blue filters. Technicolor's camera captured these 3 colors by using 3 separate strips of film and combining them to create a full color image. One of the most famous showcases of this is, as you know, The Wizard of Oz. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. Oh yeah. So if I could sing, if only I could sing. But there we go. So what else? What else do we want to know? Some iconic dates in the history of Hollywood, because the obvious stuff we know the names of the big films, and we know the names of the big actors and stuff, and it's pretty interesting to dive into that world. So dates, where do we start? Fox Film Corporation was formed in 1915 by William Fox, but by 1935 it had merged with 20th Century Pictures to form 20th Century Fox. So that's where that comes from. In 1939, the movie Gone with the Wind smashed all box office records and was the first color movie to win an Oscar for Best Picture. In 1947, the fear of communism leads Congress to investigate Hollywood. And at that time, 352 screenwriters, actors, and directors were blacklisted and refused work. Refused, or they were just banned. They're banned from working because your ideologies are not our ideologies, and this is our land. So, a lot of people were persecuted around about that point in time, and it's probably never going away. There's always a political wing to anything that's popular and cultural and influences people. So, 1953, How to Marry a Millionaire, starring Marilyn Monroe, the girl with the beautiful dress, is filmed in CinemaScope, a revolutionary widescreen process with stereophonic sound. Yeah, so the cinemas experimented with making the screens wide, and this was, I think, just after the introduction of of television, because television was taking from cinema what it had before and making it more accessible. So cinema had to diversify. And that's where the big widescreen comes from. How cool is that? Other interesting facts. Did you know that at one point in time, alcohol was banned in Hollywood? Yeah, it was. Obviously, that did not last very long. Other interesting facts, another reason for the fact that Hollywood emerged as a center of filmmaking is that early on, most movie making patents were held by Thomas Edison's company. And this was based in New Jersey, down the east coast of the United States. Filmmakers there were sued to stop their productions, and to escape this, they began moving west. Capitol Records in Hollywood has blinking lights on the top that spell out Hollywood in Morse code. How wild is that? People do have very strange ideas, as if anyone has ever noticed that. I guess if you're in the military or the army or something, you'd be like, there's a message there. Right. Finally, legendary Hollywood producer Hal Roach used to employ someone called Wildie, who was either an insane person or a drunk, who would sit in his writer's room and spout crazy ideas whenever they had writer's block. There's no substitute for the human imagination. And I guess if you're looking at a story and wondering where did that crazy plot line come from, well, maybe now you know. Maybe now you know. So what are your favorite films? What do you like? Do you like the old ones? I'm a fan of the great old black and white films where there were very, very few special effects and you had to rely on the charisma and magnetism of the actors just being in the space and working on their craft and their art. I think a lot of the new films rely too much on editing and graphical elements, but that's just my opinion. Good film is a good film. So many genres. It's nice to have choice. It's lovely to have a choice. So there we go. That was a little bit of the history of Hollywood. I hope you find it interesting, and let me know what I should present for you next. Let me know what you think might be interesting, or dive into the subject a little more yourself. There we go. That's our interesting stuff for today. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, have a great day. Take care.